The sky above Varix Prime burned red with smoke and fire. Lieutenant Jake Morrison pressed his back against the crumbling wall of what used to be someone's home. His rifle felt heavy in his hands, but he kept it ready. Around him, his squad members took cover wherever they could find it. The ground shook every few seconds as enemy artillery shells crashed into the city ruins. Jake had been fighting on this planet for 3 weeks now. The Galactic Coalition had sent his unit here to push back the swarm, a parasitic species that consumed everything in its path. The swarm didn't negotiate. They didn't take prisoners. They just destroyed and moved on to the next world. "Morrison, we need to move soon," said Vexus, the massive reptilian warrior crouched beside him. Vexus stood nearly 7 feet tall, with scales that could deflect small arms fire. He had been in the Coalition military for 20 years, and Jake trusted his judgment. Jake nodded and looked around at the rest of his squad. There were 8 of them in total. Besides Vexus, there was Zara, the young Valerian medic who had joined them only 2 weeks ago. She looked fragile, her body made of what appeared to be living crystal that caught the light even in this dark place. Her large eyes showed fear, but she held her medical kit close and stayed ready. The rest of the squad consisted of 2 more humans, a pair of insectoid crick soldiers, and a floating energy being named Luxor, who served as their communications specialist. They were pinned down in the ruins of the Eastern District, unable to advance or retreat safely. "The artillery is set up in the factory complex, about 200 meters north," Jake said, checking his tactical display. "As long as those guns keep firing, we're stuck here. The whole battalion is stuck here. We should wait for air support," Zara said quietly. Her voice had a musical quality that human ears found pleasant, like wind chimes in a soft breeze. Jake understood her concern. It made sense, but he also knew that air support wasn't coming anytime soon. The swarm had shot down 3 Coalition fighters already today. Command wouldn't risk any more until they cleared out the anti-aircraft positions, and those couldn't be cleared until someone dealt with the artillery. "Air support is at least 3 hours away," Jake said. "We don't have 3 hours. Those guns are tearing apart our defensive line. If we don't stop them now, the swarm will break through and overrun the whole sector." Vexus made a rumbling sound deep in his throat, which Jake had learned meant agreement. "The human is right. We must act now." Zara's crystalline features shifted in what Jake recognized as distress. She had read about humans in the Coalition database, but reading about them and fighting alongside them were 2 very different things. The database said humans were reckless and prone to self-destructive behavior in combat. She had assumed this was exaggeration or propaganda. Now, she was beginning to wonder. "I have a plan," Jake said, bringing up a holographic map that projected from his wrist computer. The factory complex sat on slightly higher ground, with the artillery pieces positioned to fire over the walls. There were 3 heavy guns, each capable of launching explosive shells over 5 kilometers. Swarm drones crawled all over the complex like ants on a hill. "If we circle around to the east, there's a collapsed section of the wall we can use for entry. We hit them fast, plant charges on the guns, and get out before they know what happened. That route takes us through an open kill zone." One of the Crick soldiers clicked in his language. Luxor translated the concerned chirps and buzzes. "We will be exposed for at least 30 seconds. "I know," Jake admitted. "But it's the only approach they won't expect. They've got the direct routes covered with heavy weapons. This way gives us a chance." The squad fell silent for a moment. Each member knew what Jake was proposing was dangerous, but they also knew he was right about the time constraint. Every minute they waited, more Coalition soldiers died under that artillery bombardment. "I will go with Morrison," Vexus said finally. "My scales can take more punishment than most. I will draw their fire." "We all go," Jake said firmly. "We're a squad. We do this together or not at all." Zara felt her internal structure vibrate with anxiety. This was madness. Humans were supposed to be clever warriors, not suicidal ones. But as she looked at Jake's face, she saw no fear there, just determination and focus. He wasn't being reckless. He had simply calculated that the risk to 8 soldiers was worth potentially saving hundreds. "All right," Jake said, checking his rifle one more time. "We move in 2 minutes. Stay low, stay fast, and watch your spacing. If the shooting starts before we reach the wall, take any cover you can find and suppress their fire." Questions? Nobody spoke. They all began checking their weapons and equipment. Zara ran diagnostics on her medical scanner and made sure her emergency stasis fields were charged. If anyone got injured, she would need to work fast. Jake took several deep breaths, centering himself for what was coming. He thought briefly about his family back on Earth. His sister Kate, who worked as a teacher in Portland. His father, who had served in the coalition military before him. They would be proud of what he was doing here, even if they would worry about the danger. 30 seconds, Jake announced. The squad formed up in movement order. Jake would lead, with Vexus right behind him. Zara would stay in the middle where she was safest. The others spread out to cover different angles. 15 seconds. Zara's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her medical kit. She had trained for combat medicine, but training and reality were never the same thing. She watched Jake's back, seeing how calm he appeared despite the situation. Humans were strange creatures. Go. Jake launched himself over the low wall and began sprinting toward the factory complex. His squad followed immediately, spreading out to make themselves harder targets. The distance to the collapsed wall section was about 150 meters across open ground. For the first few seconds, everything was quiet, except for the sound of their boots on broken pavement. Zara's hope began to rise. Maybe they would make it across unseen. Maybe Jake's plan would actually work. Then the world exploded into violence. The swarm had sensors watching the approach after all. Red bolts of energy began ripping through the air around them. Jake dove and rolled, coming up running in a different direction. Vexus roared and returned fire with his heavy plasma cannon. The Crick soldiers buzzed in alarm as shots passed close to their heads. "Keep moving," Jake shouted over the squad channel. "Don't stop." Zara ran as fast as her crystalline legs could carry her, which wasn't very fast compared to the others. A bolt of energy struck the ground near her feet, and the heat made her whole body ache. Valerians were not built for frontline combat. They were halfway across when Jake saw the swarm artillery beginning to adjust its aim toward them. The massive guns were rotating, preparing to fire directly at the squad rather than over their heads at distant targets. "Incoming," Luxor's translated voice warned. "Artillery targeting us." Jake pushed himself faster. 70 meters to the wall. They could make it. They had to make it. The first artillery shell landed 30 meters to their left, creating a crater and sending chunks of debris flying through the air. The shock wave knocked 2 of the soldiers down, but they scrambled back to their feet and kept running. 40 meters to go. The second shell was closer, landing right behind them. Jake felt the heat wash over his back, and the pressure wave lift him off his feet. Time seemed to slow down as he flew through the air, tumbling helplessly. He saw Zara's horrified face as she watched him soar past her. He saw the ruined building rushing up to meet him. Then he hit hard, smashing through the remains of a wall and disappearing into the collapsed structure. Dust and debris rained down, and for a moment, everything went dark and silent inside the ruins. The dust took several seconds to settle. Zara stared at the collapsed building where Jake had disappeared, her medical scanner already active in her hands. The device showed her readings through the debris, and what she saw made her crystalline heart sink. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, severe trauma to at least 3 major body systems. By Valerian standards, by most species standards, these were fatal injuries without immediate medical intervention. "Morrison," Vexus called out, his weapon still tracking potential threats. "Report." 7. There was no answer from inside the ruins. Zara made her decision instantly. She was a medic. Her duty was clear. She sprinted toward the collapsed building, her feet crunching on broken glass and twisted metal. The rest of the squad provided covering fire, keeping the swarm drones occupied while she reached their fallen squad leader. "Be careful," Luxor's voice warned in her helmet. The structure is unstable. Zara ignored the warning and climbed over a pile of rubble. Her scanner guided her to where Jake lay, partially buried under chunks of concrete and metal beams. She could see one of his arms twisted at an angle that made her feel sick. His armor was cracked in several places, and there was blood on his face. She began pulling debris away, her delicate crystalline hands working as fast as they could. A piece of rebar came free, and she tossed it aside. Then a chunk of wall, then more twisted metal. Within 30 seconds, she had cleared enough to reach him properly. "Jake Morrison, can you hear me?" she asked, switching to direct communication. Her scanner showed his vital signs were present, but erratic. His left arm was definitely broken in 2 places. She could see the bone displacement even through his torn uniform sleeve. His ribs were cracked, at least 3 of them. His left leg had a compound fracture, though thankfully, the bone hadn't broken through the skin. By all reasonable medical standards, he should be unconscious from shock and pain. Instead, Jake's eyes opened. Zara nearly dropped her scanner in surprise. His eyes were clear, focused, despite the obvious agony he must be experiencing. He looked at her, then down at his own injuries, assessing the damage with a calmness that seemed impossible. "How bad?" he asked, his voice rough but steady. "You need immediate stasis and evacuation," Zara said quickly, reaching for her medical kit. "You have multiple fractures, internal injuries, possible spinal damage. You cannot move. I will stabilize you and call for emergency extraction." Jake coughed, and blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. Zara's medical training screamed at her that this was a critical sign. Internal bleeding, possibly from damaged lungs or other organs. He needed a hospital. He needed surgery. He needed to be transported now. "No time," Jake said, pushing himself up to a sitting position. "Stop," Zara commanded, trying to gently push him back down. "You will make your injuries worse. You must remain still." But Jake wasn't listening. He had already tuned out everything except his own internal assessment of his condition. Years of military training had taught him to evaluate combat injuries quickly. Broken arm, yes. Ribs cracked, definitely. Leg fractured but still attached. Internal bleeding, probably, but not immediately fatal. He could still function. He had to function. The mission wasn't complete. Jake looked at his left arm, hanging uselessly at his side. The bone was clearly displaced, creating a visible deformity under his skin. He had seen this kind of break before, both in training videos and in real combat. The bone needed to be realigned, or it would heal wrong, if it healed at all. Standard procedure was to wait for proper medical treatment. Let the doctors handle it with anesthesia, with proper tools, with imaging equipment to ensure perfect alignment. But standard procedure assumed he had time. "What are you doing?" Zara asked, her voice rising in pitch as she watched Jake reach across with his right hand to grip his broken left arm. Jake didn't answer. He was focusing entirely on what needed to happen next. He located the break point by feel, finding where the bone had separated. His fingers probed the injury site, and waves of pain shot through his nervous system. He acknowledged the pain, filed it away in his mind, and continued his examination. The break was clean enough. Both pieces of bone were still mostly aligned, just displaced. If he could force them back together properly, he could splint the arm and still use it enough to fight. It would hurt. It would hurt worse than almost anything he had ever experienced. But pain was temporary. His squad's survival was permanent. "Please do not," Zara said, her translator struggling to keep up with her rapid, panicked speech. "I have stasis fields. I have proper medical equipment. You do not need to do this." Jake looked at her for just a moment. He saw the fear in her crystalline features, the genuine concern. She didn't understand yet. She would. "Sorry," he said simply. Then he gripped his broken arm firmly with his right hand. felt for the exact position where the bone needed to go, and pulled, while simultaneously pushing the displaced section back into alignment. The sound was terrible. Zara's sensitive Valerian hearing picked up every detail. The grinding of bone on bone, the tearing of damaged tissue, the sharp crack as the pieces suddenly slipped back into their proper position. But worse than the sound was watching Jake's face. His jaw clenched so hard. Zara thought his teeth might break. His eyes squeezed shut. The muscles in his neck stood out like steel cables. Every part of his body went rigid with the effort of controlling his reaction to the pain. But he didn't scream. He didn't pass out. He didn't stop. Tears streamed down his face from the pure physical trauma. But when he opened his eyes again, they were still clear, still focused, still determined. Zara felt her vision begin to blur. Her legs weakened. This wasn't possible. No species could endure that kind of pain while conscious and maintain control. The Valerian people had studied pain responses across hundreds of species. They had detailed charts and graphs showing pain thresholds and shock responses. Humans weren't supposed to be able to do this, but Jake had just done it. Her crystalline body couldn't process what she had witnessed. The logical, medical part of her mind shut down trying to reconcile what her scanner readings told her with what she had just seen. A being had just performed crude surgery on himself without anesthesia, without proper tools, using only brute force and willpower. Zara's legs gave out completely. She felt herself falling, the world tilting sideways. The last thing she saw before unconsciousness claimed her was Jake testing his newly realigned arm, flexing his fingers to ensure nerve function was intact. She hit the ground, her crystalline form making a musical sound as it struck the rubble. Zara is down. Vexus's voice came over the squad channel. Within seconds, the big reptilian warrior was climbing into the ruins. He saw Zara's unconscious form, and Jake sitting there, holding his arm, which was clearly broken, but now roughly straightened. She fainted? Vexus asked, already knowing the answer. Yeah, Jake said, his voice tight with pain. He was still fighting to control. She saw me reset the arm. Vexus made that rumbling sound again, but this time it had a note of dark amusement. First time working with humans? Second week, Jake confirmed. He was already tearing strips from his uniform, preparing to make a splint. She'll understand eventually. Vexus gently picked up Zara's light crystalline body with one massive arm. You are insane. You know this? I'm mission-focused, Jake corrected, wincing as he wrapped the cloth strips around his arm. There's a difference. To everyone else in the galaxy, no difference, Vexus said. But there was respect in his gravelly voice. Zara's eyes fluttered open after only a few seconds. Valerian consciousness loss was brief, more of a system reset than true unconsciousness. She found herself being held by Vexus, and her first coherent thought was to check on her patient who was now standing up. No, Zara said weakly. You cannot stand. Your leg is broken. Your ribs are cracked. You need to lie down. Jake tested his weight on his injured leg. It hurt, but it held. The break wasn't as bad as the arm had been. He could work with it. Mission first, Jake said, his voice stronger now that the worst of the pain was fading to a manageable level. We still need to take out those artillery pieces. Once that's done, I'll let you patch me up properly. Deal? Zara stared at him. This human had just snapped his own bones back into place, was now standing on a broken leg with cracked ribs, and was proposing to continue the assault on a fortified enemy position. You will die, Zara said flatly. Maybe, Jake admitted, checking his rifle to make sure it still functioned. But if we don't take out those guns, a lot more people will definitely die. The mission matters more than my comfort. He started limping toward the edge of the ruined building, moving slower than before but still moving with clear purpose. Vexus set Zara down gently and followed Jake. Zara stood there for a moment, her entire understanding of biology and medicine challenged by what she had just witnessed. Then her training reasserted itself. Jake was injured and refusing proper treatment. As his medic, her duty was to stay with him and provide whatever care she could, even if he was too stubborn to accept evacuation. She checked her medical kit, made sure her emergency supplies were ready, and followed the human who refused to stop. Jake limped out of the ruined building and back into the battlefield. Every step sent pain shooting through his broken leg. But he had learned long ago how to compartmentalize physical discomfort. The pain was just information. It told him his body was damaged, but it didn't prevent him from functioning. The rest of the squad had taken defensive positions around the ruins, still trading fire with swarm drones. When they saw Jake emerge, weapons ready despite his obvious injuries, several of them stopped shooting for just a moment in surprise. "Morrison is mobile," Luxor announced over the squad channel, his translated voice carrying notes of disbelief. "Injuries confirmed, but he is combat effective." The two human soldiers in the squad, Danny Cooper and Lisa Hayes, didn't look surprised at all. They had served with other humans before. They knew what their species was capable of when necessity demanded it. "Of course he is," Danny said, dropping a swarm drone with a precise shot. "Takes more than a few broken bones to stop a Marine." Zara caught up to Jake, her medical scanner still active and tracking his vital signs. The readings hadn't improved. If anything, his condition was slightly worse due to the movement and exertion. But there he was, checking his ammunition count and studying the tactical situation like nothing was wrong. "Jake Morrison," Zara said, trying to keep her voice professional despite her continued shock. "Your pain levels must be extreme. How are you even standing?" Jake glanced at her while loading a fresh magazine into his rifle. His face was pale and covered in sweat, clear signs of the trauma his body was experiencing. But his hands were steady. "Pain is just a signal," Jake said. "My brain is receiving the signal and acknowledging it. But I don't have to let it control me. Mind over matter. We call it on Earth. That is not how biology works," Zara protested. "Pain exists to prevent further injury. You are overriding your own survival instincts." "Yeah," Jake admitted. "But my survival instincts are telling me to run away and hide until I heal. And if I do that, the artillery keeps firing, and more people die. So I'm overriding those instincts with something stronger." "What could be stronger than survival?" Zara asked, genuinely curious now. Jake smiled, though it looked more like a grimace of pain. Vexus rejoined them, his heavy plasma cannon humming with stored energy. "The collapsed wall section is still accessible. We lost Surprise, but the swarm is focused on our current position. If we move now, we can still reach it." Jake nodded, then addressed the entire squad over their channel. "Listen up. I know I look like hell, but I can still fight. We're continuing the mission. That artillery has to go down. Everyone understand?" There was a chorus of acknowledgements. Even the soldiers who weren't human seemed to accept that Jake was going to keep going regardless of their opinions. His determination was so absolute that arguing seemed pointless. "Danny, Lisa, you're with me on point. Vexus, you and the Crick soldiers provide suppressing fire. Luxor, keep monitoring swarm communications. Zara, stay in the middle of the formation where it's safest." "I should be with you," Zara objected. "In case your condition worsens." "If my condition worsens, there's not much you can do about it in the middle of a firefight anyway," Jake said bluntly. "Stay safe. I need my medic alive." Before Zara could argue further, Jake was moving. His limp was pronounced, and she could see him favoring his injured side, but he maintained a reasonable pace. Danny and Lisa fell in beside him, their weapons sweeping potential threat zones. The squad advanced toward the factory complex in a fighting retreat pattern, moving from cover to cover while maintaining fire on the swarm positions. Jake directed their movement with hand signals and short verbal commands, his tactical thinking apparently unaffected by his injuries. Zara watched in fascination as Jake used his broken arm to help stabilize his rifle. He had splinted it with torn cloth and a piece of metal rod, creating a crude but functional brace. Every time he raised the weapon to fire, she saw pain flash across his face. Every time he pulled the trigger, the recoil jarred his broken bones. But he kept firing. His shots still accurate and deadly. They reached the collapsed section of wall after 2 minutes of running combat. 3 swarm drones lay destroyed in their wake. Jake had personally eliminated 2 of them, despite his condition. Vexus, Crick's team, hold this position and cover our exit, Jake ordered. Everyone else, with me. We're going inside. The factory complex was dark and filled with the chittering sounds of swarm drones. The artillery pieces sat in what used to be the main manufacturing floor, their massive barrels pointing toward the coalition lines. Dozens of drones crawled over the guns, operating them with mechanical efficiency. Jake led his smaller team through the shadows, moving as quietly as possible with a broken leg. Zara followed close behind, her medical scanner tracking not just Jake but all of them. She had already prepared 3 stasis fields for emergency use. At this point, she accepted that Jake wouldn't stop unless he physically couldn't continue, so the best she could do was be ready when that moment came. They planted demolition charges on the first artillery piece without being detected. The second gun went just as smoothly. But as they approached the third and final artillery piece, a swarm drone spotted them. The alarm went out immediately. Suddenly, the entire complex came alive with hostile movement. Drones poured from side passages and dropped from the ceiling. Red energy bolts filled the air. Charges on the last gun now, Jake shouted, returning fire. We don't leave without finishing the job. Danny sprinted for the artillery piece, dodging fire from multiple angles. Lisa covered him, her rifle barking in rapid succession. Luxor projected a hard light shield that deflected several shots that would have hit them. Jake saw a drone flanking toward Zara's position. The Valarian medic was focused on treating one of the Crick soldiers who had taken a glancing hit. She didn't see the threat approaching. He didn't think. He just moved. Jake threw himself between Zara and the attacking drone, his body serving as a shield. The drone's energy weapon discharged directly into his side, catching him in the already cracked ribs. The impact drove the air from his lungs and sent fresh agony through his entire torso. He felt something tear inside his chest, and the taste of blood filled his mouth. But his return fire put 3 rounds through the drone's central processor, dropping it instantly. Zara spun around at the sound of weapons fire so close. She saw Jake staggering, his hand pressed to his side where the armor had been burned through. Her scanner went wild with alerts. Critical, damage, multiple organ trauma. Severe internal bleeding now confirmed. Why did you do that? Zara demanded, rushing to him with her medical equipment. Jake coughed, and more blood came up. You're my medic. Can't have you getting killed. You are the one who is dying now, Zara said, her hands shaking as she tried to apply emergency treatment. Not dead yet, Jake said, his voice weaker but still determined. He raised his rifle again as more drones approached. Danny's voice came over the channel. Charges placed. We need to go. Now. Jake nodded, then started moving back toward the exit. Every step was torture now. The new injury on top of his existing trauma was pushing him toward his absolute limits. But the mission wasn't complete until they were clear of the blast radius. The squad fought their way back to the collapsed wall where Vexus waited. Jake's vision was starting to blur, and he knew that was a bad sign, but he kept putting one foot in front of the other. Kept firing when targets presented themselves. Kept leading his squad. They cleared the factory complex and ran for the cover of the nearby ruins. Behind them, Danny triggered the demolition charges remotely. The explosion was enormous. All 3 artillery pieces detonated simultaneously, and secondary explosions followed as stored ammunition cooked off. The entire factory complex collapsed in a spectacular display of fire and destruction. The swarm artillery bombardment stopped immediately. The coalition lines were saved. Jake allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. Mission accomplished. The artillery was destroyed. His squad was alive. The people he had promised to protect were safe. Only then did he let his body acknowledge what he had put it through. His legs gave out, and he collapsed to his knees. The pain that he had been pushing aside suddenly roared back with overwhelming force. His vision darkened at the edges. He heard Zara shouting something in her language, felt her hands on him as she deployed her medical equipment. But the sounds were getting distant, like he was underwater. Jake's last conscious thought before darkness claimed him was simple satisfaction. He had done his job. He had protected his people. Whatever happened next, he could face it knowing he hadn't quit, hadn't given up, hadn't let pain stop him from doing what needed to be done. He smiled one more time and let the darkness take him. Zara's hands moved with practiced efficiency despite her panic. Jake had collapsed completely, his body finally surrendering to the trauma it had endured. Her medical scanner painted a grim picture. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, organ damage, severe shock, and the new burns from the energy weapon that had struck his ribs. Any other species would have been dead already. Most species would have lost consciousness immediately after the initial explosion that threw him into the building. But Jake had kept fighting for another 15 minutes with injuries that should have been impossible to function through. Stasis field active, Zara announced, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. A blue glow surrounded Jake's unconscious form, slowing his biological processes and preventing his condition from worsening. I need immediate evacuation. Patient is critical. Vexus was already on the comm channel, calling for emergency transport. The destruction of the artillery meant Coalition air support could finally move safely through this sector. A medical shuttle would arrive in less than 5 minutes. Danny and Lisa took up defensive positions around their fallen squad leader. Their faces were grim but not surprised. They had seen humans push themselves to this point before. It was what their species did when the mission demanded it. He knew this would happen, Danny said quietly to Lisa. He knew he was hurting himself worse with every step. He just didn't care. Asa, of course he didn't care, Lisa replied, watching the sky for the incoming shuttle. The mission came first. It always comes first. For people like him. Zara heard their conversation and felt something shift in her understanding. Jake hadn't been ignorant of his injuries. He had known exactly how much damage he was doing to himself. He had made a conscious choice to sacrifice his own well-being for the objective. That wasn't stupidity or recklessness. That was something else entirely. Something that made Zara's crystalline structure resonate with an emotion she couldn't quite name. The medical shuttle arrived with a roar of engines, settling onto a cleared space near their position. A full medical team poured out, including 2 Valarian doctors and a human combat surgeon. They took over Jake's care immediately, transferring him to an advanced medical pod. Multiple fractures, self-splinted. One of the Valarian doctors noted, examining Jake's arm. Crude, but effective. Who treated him? He treated himself, Zara said quietly. I watched him snap the bones back into alignment with his own hands. No anesthesia, no medical tools, just brute force. The human surgeon didn't look surprised. That's field expedient care. We teach it in human military training. Sometimes, you don't have the luxury of waiting for proper medical treatment. But the pain, Zara protested. The pain should have made it impossible. Humans can override their pain responses when necessary, the surgeon explained, monitoring Jake's vital signs. We're not immune to pain. We just have a high tolerance for it when we're motivated enough. This Marine was motivated by the mission and protecting his squad. The Valarian doctor made a sound that indicated professional confusion. His species fascinates and horrifies me in equal measure. He should have died from shock alone, but he didn't, the human surgeon said with clear pride, because he's a tough son of a gun who refused to quit. Now let's make sure we save him. He earned it. The shuttle lifted off, carrying Jake toward the Coalition medical ship in orbit. Zara wanted to go with him, but her duty was with the rest of the squad. They still had to make their way back to Coalition lines and file reports on the mission. As they walked back through the ruined city, Zara found herself walking beside Vexus. The big reptilian warrior had fought beside humans for years and had seen their particular brand of determination many times. "You are thinking about what you witnessed," Vexus said. "It wasn't a question. I cannot stop thinking about it," Zara admitted. "In all my medical training, across all the species I studied, I have never encountered anything like human pain tolerance. It defies logic." "It is not about pain tolerance," Vexus said. "It is about purpose. Humans can endure almost anything, if they believe it serves a greater purpose. They feel pain, just like the rest of us. They simply refuse to let it stop them." Zara processed this for a moment. "That seems like a dangerous evolutionary trait. It leads to self-destruction." "Ling, rate, Ling, sometimes," Vexus agreed. "But it also makes them the most reliable soldiers in the coalition. When a human tells you they will complete a mission, you can believe them. They will complete it or die trying. There is no middle ground." Over the next 3 days, Zara couldn't get Jake out of her mind. She returned to the medical ship as soon as her duties allowed and checked on his condition. The human doctors had performed surgery to properly set his bones and repair his internal damage. They said he would make a full recovery in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Zara's people took months to heal from far less severe injuries. Human biology was not just resilient, but remarkably efficient at self-repair. It was as if their entire species had evolved specifically for warfare and survival. She visited Jake's recovery room when he was still unconscious. His body lay in the medical pod, surrounded by monitoring equipment and healing fields. Even unconscious, even broken, he looked somehow peaceful, like he had no regrets about what he had done. Zara pulled up his medical file and read through it carefully. This wasn't the first time Jake had been severely injured in combat. He had been hospitalized 4 times in his military career. Each time, he had pushed himself beyond what should have been possible. Each time, he had completed his mission before allowing himself to collapse. There were commendations in his file, medals for valor, letters from commanding officers praising his dedication and courage. But there were also notes from military psychologists expressing concern about his tendency toward self-destructive behavior in combat situations. Zara didn't think it was self-destructive, though. Jake wasn't trying to hurt himself. He was simply willing to accept injury if it meant accomplishing something important. There was a difference. She spent hours reviewing coalition medical databases, reading about human psychology and their approach to pain and injury. What she learned both fascinated and troubled her. Humans taught their children from a young age that pain was temporary but accomplishment was permanent. They valued endurance, persistence, and determination above almost everything else. Their entire culture celebrated individuals who pushed through hardship to achieve their goals. They even had sayings about it. No pain, no gain. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Pain is weakness, leaving the body. These weren't just empty phrases. They represented core human values. Other species in the coalition didn't think this way. Most species viewed pain as something to be avoided, injury as something requiring immediate rest and recovery. The idea of deliberately pushing through agony to continue working was alien to them. But to humans, it was normal. It was expected. It was what you did when something mattered. On the 4th day, Jake woke up. Zara was reviewing medical supplies when she got the notification. She immediately made her way to his recovery room. When she entered, she found him sitting up in bed, arguing with the human doctor about when he could return to active duty. 6 weeks minimum, the doctor was saying firmly. Your bones need time to heal properly. If you stress them too early, you risk permanent damage. I feel fine, Jake protested, though his voice was still weak. I can handle light duty at least. Lieutenant Morrison, you nearly died. Your body needs rest. Jake saw Zara enter, and his expression softened slightly. Hey, Doc. Did we get the artillery? Zara felt that strange resonance in her crystalline structure again. The first thing he asked about wasn't his own condition. It was the mission. Yes, Zara said. All 3 guns were destroyed. The coalition lines held. You saved many lives. Jake nodded, satisfied. Good. That's good. You also nearly ended your own life. Zara added, moving closer to his bed. Why did you do it? Why did you keep fighting when you were so badly injured? Jake was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Because stopping wasn't an option. Those artillery pieces were killing people. My squad needed me. The mission required completion. My pain, my injuries, those were just obstacles. I couldn't let obstacles stop me from doing what needed to be done. But what if you had died? Zara pressed. Then I would have died completing my mission, Jake said simply. There are worse ways to go. Zara stared at him, trying to comprehend this mindset. Your life is valuable, Jake Morrison. You should not throw it away so easily. I'm not throwing it away, Jake said. I'm using it. There's a difference. My life has value because I use it to protect others and accomplish important goals. If I just hid in the rear areas to keep myself safe, what would be the point? The human doctor nodded approvingly. That's the spirit. But you still need 6 weeks of recovery before I clear you for combat. Jake sighed but didn't argue further. Zara could see he was tired, his body demanding rest, even if his mind was ready to get back to work. I will check on you again tomorrow, Zara said, preparing to leave. Zara, Jake called out. She turned back. Thanks for patching me up. I know I wasn't the easiest patient to work with. Zara made a sound that was close to laughter. You were impossible, but you were also brave. I have never seen anything like what you did. Just another day in the coalition military, Jake said with a tired smile. Get some rest yourself. You earned it. As Zara left the medical bay, she made a decision. She was going to request a permanent transfer to human integrated units. If she was going to be a combat medic, she needed to understand the species that refused to quit, that fought through pain that would cripple anyone else, that valued mission accomplishment above their own safety. She needed to understand humans. Because in a galaxy at war, they might be the edge that made all the difference. 3 weeks passed before Zara saw Jake again. She had been assigned to other units during that time, treating injuries and working with different squads. But her mind kept returning to that day in the ruins, to the human who had snapped his own bones back into place and kept fighting. She had submitted her transfer request to the Coalition Medical Command. She wanted to work exclusively with human integrated units. Her request had been approved almost immediately. Apparently, medics who understood how to work with humans were in high demand. Most species found human behavior too difficult to predict. When Zara returned to the medical ship to check on Jake's progress, she found his recovery room empty. The human nurse at the station smiled when she asked about him. Lieutenant Morrison was discharged 2 days ago, the nurse said. Against medical advice, I should mention. The doctors wanted him to stay another week, but he insisted he was ready for light duty. He has only been recovering for 3 weeks, Zara protested. His bones cannot be fully healed yet. They're about 80% healed, the nurse explained. Which for a human is enough to return to non-combat duties. We heal faster than most species. It's one of our advantages. Zara left the medical ship and made her way to the Coalition Command Center where Jake's unit was stationed. She found him in a briefing room, reviewing tactical data with Vexus and the rest of his squad. He was wearing a support brace on his left arm and moving a bit stiffly, but he was on his feet and functional. Zara, Jake said when he noticed her. His face brightened. I heard about your transfer request. Welcome to the Human Integration Program. You heard about that? Zara asked, surprised. Command asked me to provide a recommendation, Jake admitted. I told them you were exactly the kind of medic human units needed. Someone who won't panic when we do something that looks insane. but is actually just necessary. Zara moved closer, her medical scanner automatically checking Jake's vital signs out of habit. Your bones are not fully healed. You should still be in recovery. Fev. 179. 1. 1. 1. They're healed enough, Jake said. I'm on restricted duty. No combat operations for another 3 weeks. Just planning, training, and administrative work. The doctors cleared me for this. Reluctantly, I am certain, Zara said. Jake grinned. Very reluctantly. But I was going crazy lying in that bed. I needed to do something useful. Jake, Vexus rumbled his version of laughter. Humans do not know how to rest. It is one of their greatest weaknesses, and also one of their greatest strengths. Over the following weeks, Zara learned more about human culture and biology than any textbook could have taught her. She worked with multiple human units, treating injuries and observing how they approached combat, pain, and recovery. She noticed patterns. Humans did feel pain just as intensely as other species. Their nervous systems registered damage and sent clear signals to their brains. But somewhere in their evolution, humans had developed an unusual ability to override those signals when they believed it was necessary. They called it mental toughness. Zara thought of it as controlled insanity. She watched a human private run 5 kilometers on a sprained ankle because his unit needed to reach an objective on time. She saw a human engineer repair a damaged shield generator while suffering from a concussion that would have left most species unable to stand. She treated a human pilot who flew her damaged fighter back to base despite 3 broken ribs and a punctured lung. Each case taught her something new about the species she had chosen to work with. They weren't fearless. They were afraid of pain and death, just like everyone else. They simply refused to let that fear control their actions. One evening, Zara found Jake in the training facility, working through physical therapy exercises. His arm was out of the brace now, and he was testing its strength and flexibility. She could see from his expression that the movements still caused discomfort, but he pushed through them methodically. Your arm is healing well, Zara observed, sitting beside him on the bench. Thanks to you, Jake said. If you hadn't stabilized me when I went down, I might not have made it to the medical ship. If you had accepted proper treatment initially, you would not have needed emergency stabilization, Zara pointed out. Jake smiled. Fair point. But the mission required completion. I had to make a choice between my personal well-being and the objective. I chose the objective. Would you make the same choice again? Zara asked. Jake didn't hesitate. Yes. Every time. That's what being a soldier means. You put the mission and your people before yourself. Zara was quiet for a moment, processing this. I am beginning to understand your species better. You are not reckless. You are willing to accept costs that others would not. Exactly, Jake said. We understand that sometimes the price of success is pain, injury, or even death. We're willing to pay that price when the alternative is worse. The alternative being failure to protect others, Zara said. Right. If I had waited for proper medical treatment that day, the artillery would have kept firing. More coalition soldiers would have died. From my perspective, my broken bones were a small price to pay to prevent those deaths. Zara's crystalline features shifted in what Jake had learned to recognize as thoughtful consideration. Your culture teaches this from childhood? In a way, Jake confirmed. We learn that comfort is temporary, but accomplishment lasts. We're taught to push through difficulty because the reward on the other side is worth it. Whether that's studying hard for an exam, training for sports, or fighting for something important. And the pain you experience becomes just another difficulty to push through, Zara concluded. Exactly. Pain is just information. It tells me something is wrong. But it doesn't control my decisions unless I let it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, Zara spoke again. I fainted when you reset your broken arm. I am embarrassed by this. Jake laughed softly. Don't be. What I did was horrifying to watch. Most humans would have trouble watching someone do that to themselves. Your reaction was completely normal. But I am a medic. I should not faint at the sight of medical procedures. That wasn't a medical procedure, Jake said. That was desperate battlefield improvisation. There's a difference. And honestly, the fact that you recovered so quickly and kept working showed real professionalism. Zara felt something warm spread through her crystalline structure. Pride, perhaps, or respect earned through understanding. 4 weeks later, Jake was cleared for full combat duty. His bones had healed completely, though he would carry some scars from the experience. Zara was assigned permanently to his squad as their primary medic. Their first mission together after his recovery was a reconnaissance patrol in contested territory. As they moved through the ruins of another abandoned city, Zara found herself constantly monitoring Jake's biometrics out of habit. "I'm fine," Jake said quietly over their private channel. "You don't need to hover." "I am not hovering," Zara protested. "I am maintaining awareness of my squad's medical status. You check my vitals every 30 seconds. That's hovering." Zara made an embarrassed sound. "I worry that you will injure yourself again and not tell me until it becomes critical." Jake's voice was gentle. "I promise, if I get hurt, I'll let you know. Well, after the immediate danger is handled. Deal?" "That is not reassuring," Zara said. But there was humor in her tone now. They encountered a small swarm patrol during the mission. The firefight was brief and decisive. Jake moved with his usual confidence, and Zara noticed he protected her position just as he had done before, putting himself between her and potential threats. But this time she understood why. It wasn't that he didn't value his own life. It was that he valued hers more, because she was his medic and his squadmate. In human thinking, protecting your team was the highest priority, even if it meant accepting personal risk. After the patrol returned safely, Zara updated her personal logs. She wrote about what she had learned from working with humans, about their unique approach to pain and sacrifice, about their unwavering dedication to mission accomplishment. She concluded with a simple observation that had taken her weeks to fully understand. Humans were not fearless warriors immune to suffering. They were afraid, and they felt pain, just like everyone else. What made them special was their choice to continue despite that fear and pain. They looked at impossible situations, at overwhelming odds, at injuries that would stop any other species. And they simply asked one question: what is next? That ability to push forward no matter the cost was not biological superiority. It was cultural conditioning and individual choice. Every human made the decision daily to endure, to persist, to refuse, to quit. And in a galaxy at war against an enemy that knew no mercy, that human refusal to surrender might be exactly what the coalition needed to survive. Zara closed her logs and looked out at the stars. She had chosen to work with humans because she wanted to understand them. Now she understood, and that understanding had changed her forever. She would never faint again at the sight of a human doing something impossible, because she now knew the truth. For humans, nothing was impossible. If it mattered enough, they would break their own bones and keep fighting. They would endure unimaginable pain for their comrades. They would sacrifice everything for the mission. And she would be there to patch them up afterward, understanding finally what drove them forward when anyone else would have stopped. She would be there because someone had to take care of the species that refused to take care of themselves. Someone had to make sure these incredible, frustrating, impossible humans survived long enough to win the war. That someone, Zara had decided, would be her.